Does your child bounce, spin, wiggle, and roll instead of sit down to read? Well, I'm here to tell you that movement might be the key to unlocking your child's reading potential. Hi, I'm Dr. Deanna, homeschooling mom, former K-3 teacher for over 20 years, and during that time I earned my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. First of all, when it comes to kids who need to move and get the wiggles out, you're not alone. And in fact, there are great ways that we can tap into this and even make it an area of strength. Some kids just learn best when their bodies are moving. It doesn't mean that they're not ready to learn to read. It just means that we need to find other ways to tap into their reading potential. Here are 4 movement-friendly ways that you can tap into your child's reading ability. The first strategy is to use letter mats, and this is where reading meets at the intersection of phonics and hopscotch. In fact, there are some really great learning tools out there, and I'm going to link them below. I have them on my Amazon storefront, and these tools really capitalize on children's need to move. Remember, there's a difference between a neurodivergence in the brain and the inability to focus on a task and a child's natural need or maybe a child's inclination to move. And that's a completely different episode. But what I can tell you is that when we get into areas of things such as like ADHD, we tend to think of that as being, that hyperactivity and that movement. In fact, I think even on the screening, one of the points that you check off is, if they move around like they're, driven like by a motor. And of course, that does play into it. But there is a little bit of a misconception about ADHD being solely connected to movement and inability to sit still. So there's a fine line between the two, and I do discuss this in depth. I have a lot of personal experience in this. In fact, I myself grew up as a twice exceptional girl in the 1980s, meaning that I was gifted. I was reading at the high school level by the time I was 8, but yet I had difficulty completing basic school assignments. And it wasn't because I was goofing off. I wasn't getting in trouble. In fact, anything but get in trouble. I absolutely refused to even talk to people in class if they talked to me. But I just couldn't focus on that overwhelming worksheet. That is actually a textbook ADHD, even though it doesn't look like overactivity. So I want to be careful in differentiating between the two. And if you have any concerns about what you're seeing in your child, it never hurts to get some eyes on it, ask your pediatrician. They can refer you to an educational psychologist who assesses that for a living. Of course, also pediatricians can do that. So getting back to the letter mats, these are just absolute childhood magic for learning to read. And it really gets children engaged in hopping from sound to sound. And there's so many different things that you can do with that. But remember, phonics and movement together is just so powerful when it comes to getting our littles reading and blending and being confident in their ability to read. Here's one of my personal favorites, a beanbag toss. And you can use this for so many things. You can do this for letter and sound recognition. You can do this for building words. There are so many variations. And I myself used this as a homeschool mom when my boys were little. And I think I even have a picture of us doing that. And it's such an engaging activity that really gets them moving and taps into their natural desire to play. Most kids really love to toss beanbags, and this just adds that extra element of learning and practicing their reading skills. You could even mix it up and be like, all right, toss the beanbag on the letter that goes at the beginning of the word bat. Do you see what letter says that sound? And you can just really mix it up and make it meet whatever goal you have for your child and what they're working on. One thing I really liked to implement in my home and also when I was in the classroom was a little bit of flexible seating. You can also integrate this into your lesson. For example, one of the benefits we have if we are homeschooling or if we're doing an activity at home with our child is we can do some things that you might not be able to do with a whole class. So like if you had a scooter board or a chair that moved, you could have them roll it along and help them blend the words like that. Maybe you write it with sidewalk chalk and they blend it as they roll on the scooter board. I mean, the options are really endless. The only block to achieving this is just our limitations sometimes to think outside that box of that sitting at that desk or that kitchen table. Remember, movement breaks boost attention. So integrating that into learning definitely can be a pro. Also, something that we personally did was we used trampolines, and we had a little trampoline, and we used this for everything from letter sounds to later on when we were doing Spanish. So, there's just a lot of things you can do, even if you just have a child that needs to jump while they're practicing something. That's okay too. Go ahead and be okay with that idea of thinking outside the box and meeting your child where they're at, letting them have those little successes in a way that makes them feel confident. One of the most traditional things is air writing, and this goes all the way back. I used to do this with my kindergartners as far back as over 20 years ago. And air writing, it works on not only connecting letters and sounds in the brain, but it also is helping with that letter formation because you're making the letter in the sky. We used to call it sky writing. But one caution is to make sure that you are facing the direction so that your child is seeing the letter go the correct way. So if you're facing them and you go like this, that letter is not going to go the correct way for them. You want to make sure that you turn. Maybe you're standing shoulder to shoulder with them or sitting shoulder to shoulder. That would be fine. But if you're facing them, you want to make sure to turn like this. And that's a pro tip to ensure that they're learning proper letter formation. Remember, gross motor skills goes a long way to helping information stick in the brain. Trust me, I know when you have a child that needs to move when they learn, it can be frustrating for us as parents. But that energy can be something that we tap into. And I also want to remind you and encourage you, if you or your child get to a point where you're feeling frustrated, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to say, you know what, let's come back to that in 10 minutes. Or let's see if we can do this for 2 more minutes. Let's see if we can meet that goal. Whatever your goal for your child, if you think that they need to work on pushing through something a little bit, make a small goal. But if you think that teaching them to be able to take a break and calm themselves and come back to it would be a strategy they need to work on, you can definitely do that as a parent too. I have done both strategies depending on the situation. And I can tell you that although sometimes, we don't hit the target, but generally speaking, trusting my gut as a mom and knowing what they needed in the moment really helped to progress and make it more of a positive experience. When we work with their need to move and not against it, we tap into a really powerful way to get them engaged in learning and get them excited about it. If you want more active tips for active learners, I encourage you to subscribe right here and check out all of the activities and learning resources that I have on my Amazon storefront. I have tons of interactive games and materials that really tap into this need for children to move. Also, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel for littles ages 3 to 8, all about learning to read with full episodes, teaching phonics, and getting children engaged in movement, singing, and connecting that to the fun of learning to read. You can find both of these resources in the description box below. Drop in the comments if you have a mover and a shaker at home. Remember, these children have tremendous potential, and it's our job to help them reach it.